The Toronto Comic Arts Festival would like to honor and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are in a territory that was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon One Pump Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to share and care for the land. This land is also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This acknowledgement is a reminder that we are all treaty people and that we have a responsibility to the land and each other. TCAF celebrates the long history of sharing stories on this land and is committed to increasing Indigenous voices and perspectives in our programming.
Well, hello to everyone listening. Morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are in the world. This is part of the digital programming for the Toronto Comic Arts Festival 2023. What we learned from cartooning during the pandemic, strategies for inspiration, joy, creation, and maintaining mental health. With some special guests from Conundrum Press here in Canada, cartoonists Lynette Richards, Vingoe-Cram, Chris W. Kim, and Kiona Callihoo Ligtvoet. Welcome, everyone. I'm your moderator today, Nicole Marie Burton, here in Ottawa, founding member of ASTRA Comics, and cartoonist myself. Welcome to everyone. Could everyone just chime in for a second and tell us where they're coming in from?
I'm in Halifax.
Hi, Lynette, thanks. Chris is in Toronto.
Ottawa.
Kyle's in Ottawa.
I'm in Edmonton or Amiskwaciwâskahikan on Treaty 6.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So we've got about an hour, so let's dive right in. I'm really excited to discuss your work and the books that you were working on over the last couple of years. The COVID-19 pandemic has upset and disrupted our lives in so many different ways. It's useful for us to consider the ways that as artists and creators, we might have something useful to pass on to others in our reflection about the global pandemic. So I'd like to start with Lynette discussing her book, Call Me Bill, which is based in Nova Scotia and is rooted in a historic moment in Canadian history. Lynette, could you tell us a little bit about those events and your book?
Yeah, it's very timely, actually. This is, are we at April the 5th right now? So it was the Halifax Morning Chronicle on April 5th, 1873. So 150 years ago today, that a little paragraph appeared in the newspaper about this massive shipwreck, the SS Atlantic, White Star Line, same as the Titanic, that wrecked at the end of my road in 1873 on April 1st. So that little paragraph in the newspaper said that one of the sailors upon burial had been discovered to be female. So that's what the story is about. It's bringing to light the story of the shipwreck, the rescue, the aftermath, which brought 500 dead bodies to the shore of this tiny fishing village, and they're in 2 mass graves right at the end of the road here. And then the fact that one of the sailors was, you know, just a very interesting person that I wanted to know more about.
That's beautiful. And for anybody who is looking through this book, it is visually so beautiful. I love what you've done with the watercolors and the washes. For anybody who's been on the shores of Nova Scotia, it feels very apropos. It feels like you're there.
I'm from there too, so yeah, I agree.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, it's a marvelous immersive story about a really interesting moment in history. What brought, because you work in stained glass, is that right? What brought you to comics for this project?
Well, actually, I've been doing comics all my life before I did stained glass. I never published them, though. And my father was with the London Free Press. And so I always thought I would be an editorial cartoonist when I grew up, because that was my first exposure, was through the newspapers. But I needed to earn a living. And so I worked in the printing industry for quite a long time, and then left to have some kids. And while I was off having kids, the whole industry digitized. It went computer, and I didn't know how to work that equipment. So I needed a new career. And I looked around, and for more than one reason, I chose stained glass. But one of the reasons is because it's been around 1,000 years, and it's told stories in sequential narration. So it's an extension of storytelling using panels. And I wanted to tell women's stories. And I thought this is a good medium because it sort of designates the story sacred, and yet it has never told women's stories. So I said, I'm going to do this. That's what I'm going to do. And when I do stained glass, if you can imagine church windows, they're actually paintings on colored glass. And the paint is the same paint that's been used for 1,000 years, and it's made of ground glass, and it's only black. And you paint it onto colored glass in tone, and then you fuse it in a kiln so it melts into the colored glass. Then you assemble it all. So essentially, it's a grayscale tonal painting. And that's the same thing that I did with Call Me Bill, only I did it on paper.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I never would have connected those two media, but you've really connected them for me here. Let's move into talking about the pandemic. Where were you in 2020? And I guess my second add-on question to that is, how do you feel like it impacted this project?
Well, I had one of the streams of income that I have is teaching. So I had some full classes planned for the beginning of April, and they all had to be canceled. And so I was immediately panicked about how I was going to earn a living. I'm self-employed. So we didn't even know if there would be CERB for self-employed people at that time. Initially, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks. So I thought, well, I'm going to tear this sink and counter out of my studio that's always been in the way, and the pipes freeze, and I'm going to get this done in 2 weeks. And I did. And then we were in lockdown for 2 years. So the hardest part for me was honestly that I didn't get to see my kids, who are adults, and they're all over the country. So I didn't see them for 2.5 years, and that hurt. But I think that a lot of people kind of nested throughout the pandemic. And so one of the things they did was they put in that stained glass window, in that spot in their new cottage or their house. And I ended up having like a pretty good year or 2 years for that reason. But I was writing this book, and I had to really, really be disciplined. It's like self-discipline. I had to, work for the morning and have lunch, and then come up to my office and work on the book one way or another. And I had done most of the research before lockdown, so that was lucky. But I was writing the story, and there's so many reasons not to do it. So finally, I booked this little cabin, an off-grid cabin on the Bay of Fundy. And I went up there by myself for a week, and it was foggy, and the seals howled, and the whales just floated around and smacked their fins on the water. And I got a sense of what my character might have experienced at sea. And so it actually was an incredibly creative period for me. Discipline, I think, was the most key piece.
Yeah.
I can also say that it made me really aware of what a privileged life I've led, because there are disruptions in lives. There are wars, there are, economic downturns, there are illnesses in families. you know, becoming a parent is a huge disruption in a life. And so somewhere we have to learn how to either do our work or not do our work during these crises. And I think there are probably times when we cannot work. And I just encourage everyone to document what's going on nonetheless, because then when you can work, you've got something to harvest from.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that visual of being on the Bay of Fundy is really striking, and that must have been a really interesting place to be working on a maritime graphic novel. And I think actually, just as my closing question before I move on to the other cartoonists, I'd just like to give a bit of a salute to maritime queerness in this comic. I feel like every time I go back out to Halifax or Cape Breton, I see more diverse voices in the media, and I see more visibility for queer people, and particularly for somebody as a queer person who was warned that Nova Scotia is not a friendly or visible place for queer people. I really enjoyed reading this work for that reason, especially.
Yeah, I think it's changed an awful lot in a short amount of time, and there is a fantastically active and vibrant gay LGBTQ two-spirit community out here, multiple communities really, and we interact in different ways. So yeah, when I moved here 10 years ago too, we were a little bit nervous, but we knew we had a relative down the road, and he is from this area. And he and his brother they're pretty tough people, tough fighting people. That they say they grew up on an angle because of the wind, you know. But they said to me, if anyone
not straight.
they said, if anyone gives you a hard time, you let me know and I'll beat them up. But nobody gave us a hard time. It was perfectly welcoming, and we found lots of other gay people right here in Terrence Bay. We sometimes call it Terrence Gay.
That's amazing. Lynette, thank you so much for telling us more about this book. I really look forward to the popularity of this book exploding and getting out into all of the different corners of North America. And I think if we have time, I'll probably circle back around and see if we can maybe add some questions relating your work to some of the other works that we're going to talk about here. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And let's move on to our next cartoonist here, Kyle Vingoe-Cram, who has a debut work out with Conundrum this year called Kettle Harbour. Kyle, what can you tell us about this story, and give us an elevator pitch or a synopsis of this book?
Oh, goodness. Well, I actually just got the book in the mail today.
Yay! That's exciting.
This is,
Congrats.
My first
Beautiful.
book. Exciting. Yeah, it's sort of a queer family drama set in rural Nova Scotia about a young artist who comes back to this magical town where she spent her summers to reunite with her cousin, who she was really, really close with as a child, and his husband, and they haven't spoken in years. But the reunion doesn't quite go as planned, and the three of them have to deal with, shared trauma and memories together. So that's what the book is about, and it goes back and forth between three character perspectives, Brendan, Michael, and Andrea. So Andrea has these sort of organic flowing panels, and Michael has these little tiny squares, and Brendan is more traditional, but he's just filled with thoughts spewing everywhere all the time. So I was really trying to play around with how to communicate narrative voice and different character voices through panel layouts in telling this story. It's a work of fiction, but I would say that it does come from me. I feel like the three characters are myself split three ways in a way. But yeah, that's what it's about.
Amazing. Yeah, and you've kind of started on this question of how the story came about for you, but maybe I can tie it into the next question of where were you in 2020. What was happening in your life during the beginning of the pandemic, and how do you feel those circumstances shaped this work?
Well, for me, I think I was very privileged, very lucky in that the pandemic was generative in a lot of ways. Where I was in Dartmouth. I'm from Nova Scotia, Mi'kmaq, and at the time, my partner was working in Ottawa for the federal government, and because of the pandemic, he was able to come home. So personally, that was really great. And he worked from home for several years, so we were able to be together and kind of delay the move to Ottawa. And because of CERB funding and all of these different things and a grant from the province, I was really able to work on this book and to find my focus. You know, I think the first few months of the pandemic, it's all a blur now, but they were difficult. You know, my partner's immune compromised, and you know, we were very nervous. But in Nova Scotia, we were lucky in that things were a little bit easier. Like things would sort of gradually open up a little bit again in the summer, and then lock down again, and then open up a little bit again. So I remember that first summer, you know, going for walks, being able to see people outside. My mom was in town. My family was there, although Stephen did miss his family. So all of those things were good, and I didn't end up going back to my arts admin job, which ironically I quit to move to Ottawa, but then we didn't move to Ottawa for another couple of years. So I was like, well, I guess I'm working on this book now. And then we had a baby. So the second year of the pandemic, I really had to start organizing my time. And interestingly enough, I think that made me use my time better because I had less of it. And so I was constantly, between breastfeeding a baby, I was drawing Kettle Harbour.
Wow.
I would say I probably drew a little bit too much. I think I suffered a repetitive strain injury, and I'm still dealing with that, going on to new comics. But yeah, that's what the experience was like for me. Weirdly enough, I feel like the pandemic and the baby helped me get Kettle Harbour done, which doesn't seem to make sense, but yeah.
Well, no, but I think that, you know, maybe you're onto something there. I definitely think that as a new parent myself, having less time does seem to make you cram more into the hours that you have. I want to talk about something that you, that it was briefly mentioned. Kettle Harbour really beautifully visualizes two parallel worlds that we all keep, an inner world and an outside world. And, you know, we have our dialogue bubbles, and then we have our thought bubbles. And, you know, that interiority, exteriority is something that we all experience, but it's not always something that we see illustrated in this way. Do you feel like there's something there in terms of the shifting inner life and outer life that you experienced at this time, or was that always the scope of the project? How is it that this inner world and this outer world of thoughts and how we relate to each other, do you feel like that was impacted at all by the pandemic?
That's a good question. I started out with Kettle Harbour in 2018, knowing that I always wanted to have 3 characters. But I did start writing it as prose, and it was terrible. And so I started to experiment with the idea of a graphic novel and 3 distinct visual layouts. And I was doing that with the rough draft in 2018, which took about a year. I went about the most roundabout way of writing this. It took me so long because I didn't have a very organized technique. So no, I don't know that. Well, I don't know that playing around with the characters' voices in 3 different visual ways, distinct styles, had anything to do with the pandemic, but it was honed during the pandemic, and those rough drafts became something more formal. And I guess, yeah,
I wonder if maybe this is a part of me responding to it as the reader too. Like I am experiencing this book differently because of the pandemic. I'm looking at it as, oh, wow, this book really richly visualizes inner life and inner worlds in a way that I feel maybe more in touch with now as I've, moved everything indoors and work from home. And yeah, so maybe I'm putting this question on you, but maybe it's, there's something here for the reader too.
I think you're right. A lot of the book is about memory and trying to visualize how we look back on our lives and in different ways. Not everyone thinks the same way, and so in the way that you might use language to communicate a character in a traditional novel, I wanted to use iconography to do that in the graphic novel. I think oh my goodness, losing my train of thought. No, but I think you're right. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but without the time and the space that the pandemic allowed for me, really being at home, seeing fewer people, I don't know if I would have had the time to really develop that in the way that I did.
Because these are pretty strong characters. Like I feel like you really know these characters, and I was actually going to ask you, are these drawn from real people? And the way that you described that there are 3 splits of you is
That's
so
what my sister said.
Really?
She was like, this is just your brain 3 different ways. Well, Andrea certainly has my nose. They are drawn a little bit from people that I know, and then the imagination, and then drawing them over and over and over again. It's a really intense, almost like passionate act to draw a fictional character that many times. You start to feel very attached. It's almost erotic. And then you don't draw them ever again after that. They're like dead to you.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Thank you for creating this book. Thank you for telling us about it. It's a bit of a, I want to say surreal read, or a magical read. And it's now out and available to the public. ? Is that right?
May 9th, I think, but I just
May
got
9th.
the book today. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks.
Well, congrats again to you on your first debut graphic novel. And let's see if we can move to our next panelist and find some creative ways to tie all these pieces together at the end. Chris W. Kim, joining us from Toronto, is here to talk to us about the new graphic novel, Adherent. Chris, what would you like the world to know about this graphic novel?
Oh boy. So, I mean, I guess I'll just try and describe it. It's sort of like a fable. I tried to go for a fable feel to the book. So it's about a woman who lives in this kind of village. It's semi kind of dreamlike or fantastical. And she finds a set of notebooks by an unknown writer, but she's really captivated by what's written in them. But what's in them is just like kind of observations, just introspection and observation. But for some reason, it really connects with her. So she decides to go out beyond her village to try and find this person. And as she does, she kind of explores the world outside of her, usual confines. So yeah, I mean, it's very like stripped back. And again, I tried to go for something a bit, I don't know, abstracted or stripped down in general. Yeah, that's basically what it's about.
Yeah, I feel like you're the one that I have hardball questions for, because for whatever reason, fables launch my brain into a space of greater truths, or universally recognized human condition. It's incredibly illustrated. I loved going through this book. I want to know, what was it like working on Adherent during the pandemic? Where were you, and how did you feel like what was happening around you impacted this comic?
Yeah, so I was in Toronto, and like for me, the timing was, I got a grant, an Ontario Arts Council grant, like right before the pandemic, right before quarantine and everything. So I was planning on just, working on this. For the past graphic novels I've done, I've, had a part-time job while I was working on them. But here I'm just like, all right, I'm going to focus on this because I have the grant, and then the pandemic happened. So it was pretty nuts. And yeah, in a way, it definitely affected the mood. It's already, I don't know if it's somber, but it got more somber, maybe like excessively somber as it went on because of how the world was going. And the script kind of did change. Like I had written it all out as a draft, just like a written draft. And yeah, the ending started to change as I was working on it. And I definitely think it was affected by the state of things, the world around me as I was drawing it and writing it.
Yeah, I love this description of the work, a fabular tale that examines the ways that we connect and the ideas and places we value in our increasingly disconnected world. I also love this quote from Hartley Lynn on the Conundrum website. Chris Kim draws like a gifted, haunted anthropologist.
Very sweet of him.
I love that. I love that description of a haunted anthropologist. Do you feel like, and this is my hardball question because you wrote a fable, do you feel like there is an underlying message about the human condition here? What do you feel is the takeaway of this character's story and how it relates to us?
So I'm very bad at like takeaway messages from whatever I do. It's
well, I'm sure you could say, it's contrived if there's a takeaway. But what were your feelings of towards the end about the characters, maybe?
Right. Yeah. I mean, as to the main character, her name's M. I feel like by the end of the book, she's left very kind of at sea. Like she doesn't really, despite everything that's happened at the book, she's kind of left just somewhat where she was already at the beginning, but maybe with a little more to chew on. Yeah. And that's just true to what I feel, I don't know, about life so far. And definitely during the pandemic again, like, I have to make do with what's going on around me. It's not like I have I certainly didn't come out of the pandemic with like a great sense of self-assuredness or confidence or anything, but I don't think I should. That's probably not a healthy way to think about it anyway. So yeah, I think that came out in the book, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I love the style of this book. I feel like moving through it, readers will come to their own conclusions about what the story says. And I think that that's actually really the beauty of creating a fable or a more surreal story. I'm wondering if maybe there's, let me see here. No, that was, I feel so bad for giving you a human condition question, Chris. Sorry, but that was really one of my takeaways reading it. I really felt like there's a chance for some pretty profound takeaways here. And I don't feel like anybody necessarily waits for a creator to tell them what they're supposed to feel for a book. So I'm sorry I threw that at you. But
it's okay.
Thank you very much for creating this beautiful book. And thank you for joining us today. I'm gonna move on to our next panelist with hopefully enough time to maybe have a little bit of conversation between y'all towards the end. I'm moving now to Kiona Callihoo Ligtvoet, who has recently produced We Were Younger Once, non-linear memories of growing up as a dirt kid on the prairies. Boy, as somebody who grew up in the American Midwest, that description really resonated with me. Kiona, what can you tell us about this work that you are joining us here for today?
Well, it's the first book I've ever worked on. It was really new to me, but it's just about this piece of land script that my family cares for. It used to be part of Michelle Reserve, which is the band that my family lines are from. It's about visiting that home and growing up there. So growing up living with my mushum, which is grandpa and Cree, and then the visits as an adult that bring me back there now. So I tried to keep it really non-linear and like a diary, to really talk about and share the stories that overlap between me and my relatives, all from like my point of view, and still keeping it individual to myself, but definitely in collaboration with them, because there's little leftover bits of their childhoods all over that land as well. So it's just a little way I could make something for me and my family that is hopefully relatable to other folks who grow up in the prairies and rural settings, especially other Indigenous folks too.
Amazing. Take us through the project's creation. How did this work start for you? And as a multidisciplinary artist, how did you choose comics as a medium for it?
Well, my whole art practice revolves around this land and my family. I'm very collaborative with them, and I'm predominantly a painter, but I also do some printmaking as well. But comics was something that I had thought about before, but was really unsure how to do. It felt really intimidating. I read a lot of graphic novels and have always been a kid who was in comic shops. But when Andy and Saul from Conundrum Press reached out to me, they made it feel really low pressure, and it became like more of an option for me where I didn't feel like it was an option before, and they provided really kind mentorship. So it wasn't something that was a thought that I independently had on my own, because it felt like the hurdles were so high. But it was something that they really like comforted me in and offered me support in to actually like make a little pocketbook like this, and it be like the first thing that I've ever made along this vein. I was already doing a lot of work with drawing and text, which is why they reached out about doing a pocketbook, because I was already doing something kind of adjacent to comics, and it was exciting to get to kind of like what Kyle said, to get to like play with the format of like what a comic can be, what panels can be, and have it be like something that is a little bit more low pressure for myself, especially during a pandemic, and this being my first thing to ever do.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, let's talk about that. Where were you when the pandemic started, and what was its what was the interrelationship of COVID-19 and this project for you?
Well, it came to me like a little like midway through the beginning of the pandemic. So at the time I had graduated from university, I didn't have a job, and I was living in like a really tiny horrible basement apartment, and wasn't really sure what to do with myself. And started taking a lot of contract jobs because I was thinking a lot about stability and like just, the thoughts that you have when you don't have work and you're in a pandemic. So I started making, my friend, son of mine, and I started organizing a BIPOC peer mentorship collective, and we started doing that virtually. And I found Conundrum through that and was sharing calls for their Black and Indigenous bursary program when they reached out to see if I'd be interested in this. So it came at a good time where I was really at a crossroads of like what I was wanting to do. And I had also been able with my friend to create like a collective of supportive peers So I had a lot of space to feel supported, taking on something really new and really intimidating for myself. And a lot of them do comic work as well, or want to do. So it was kind of like sharing knowledge between all of us. And it also gave me a way to visit home and like visit the land that I grew up on and that I'm Indigenous to, where my family roots are, in a way where like I couldn't always physically be there because of the pandemic, but it was nice to like spend time working on this book and all these memories and all of, like, and to remember like all the desire paths and all the like the unique parts of this space that are so special to me and so special to my family, so that I would feel a little less lonely, especially because we went through a lot of grief during the pandemic as well. And I think it helped like self-soothe and resolve some of that for me as well. And yeah, just feeling less lonely while working on this book.
Yeah, I feel like you're tying in something here that we maybe haven't spoken about as much as we should, which is the idea that these works, or the works that we were working on during the pandemic, had a therapeutic element to it, and something that helped us connect at a time when we felt really disconnected. You draw a lot on family and place and history for this work. Did you have any shifting sense of any of those things during the pandemic?
I would say some. I think that when we were able to, like when my family and I were able to see each other, and them knowing I was working on this as well, like it became more exciting to, and like more open to like share some of our stories that didn't feel like they had a place to share, but like that time became so valuable to be together when we could be together, especially being outdoors on that land, that I think that I realized how like those parts of my childhood and like all the things I feel about this special place aren't so like, they're not so separate. So I think like learning to like really acknowledge those things and like feeling very like welcomed and like held by my family, and the excitement of like hearing things that I had never heard about of the times that they grew up on this land, because we all lived there at one point and it was a multi-generational home, and you could always come back. You could always come back to visit. And being able to connect with that in a different way that felt like it really like fed us was and like reconnected us too, was really special.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and also for this new book. I'm really excited to pick up a copy of it at TCAF later this month. So thank you for that. We've still got some time, so what I'd like to do maybe is connect some of these books a little bit, and maybe get artists to talk more with each other instead of me lobbing my silly questions at you. I'd love to go back and speak with Kyle and Lynette specifically about their books. Not to focus in on you both, but you're both Nova Scotia artists. You both mentioned Bay of Fundy. So I'm wondering if maybe the two of you could share just a little bit about, just sort of tying in with what Kiona was just talking about, the influence of place and family on our work, and if there's any sort of lessons of healing and joy that you learned during the pandemic through your creative work. I'm just wondering if either of you have more to share there around land and place, which plays into both of your books.
Okay, for me, on the just talking about family and place and all of that healing, I don't know that Kettle Harbour was a therapeutic process for me necessarily, but it did come out of my father's passing, which was in 2018. So I think at that time I realized, wow, I don't have a lot of time to write the story I want to write, because, you know, when he passed away, he still had a lot of music that he wanted to write. and didn't get to. So I just felt like time was extremely short, and so that motivated me a lot. And then just to talk about the Bay of Fundy for a second. So Kettle Harbour is very much inspired by the town of Parsboro, or Woken in Mi'kma'ki. It's on the Bay of Fundy. Between, does anyone ever been there before or know it? Parsboro?
What's the name of it?
Parsboro.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, actually haven't been to Terrence Bay before, but yeah, Parsboro has been a big town for me because I went there every summer growing up because my mom started the Ship's Company Theatre there in the 1980s. So Parsboro has long been kind of a center for the, like, a little artsy town because of the theater. And so I was careful when I was writing the story that the characters, they come to this place in the summer, but they're not necessarily from there. And that is true to my experience. And of course, in Kettle Harbour, the theater plays a large role as well. There's a sort of a fictional version of Ship's Company and a production that happens that reveals something to the characters. So yeah, the sense of place was extremely important to the book, and that coastline, that area.
Yeah.
How about you, Lynette?
I think Kyle mentioned earlier that the pandemic took its time coming to Nova Scotia. And I think we felt, maybe a little bit smug and maybe a little bit protective. But it came, it came just like it came to everywhere else, as of course it would. And I think that we were really lucky nonetheless, because we could go outside and there was fresh air and there were oceans, washing the shores. And there was this sense that, time passes, everything changes, everything is okay if you're out in nature. And we were able to get out in nature, whereas it doesn't sound like Chris was able to get out in nature very much in Toronto. And I can only feel for folks that were trapped in apartments in big cities. So, in some ways, because of Nova Scotia, I was happy to be isolated,
Yeah, I don't even know if I would have gotten some of the reference photos that I took and the drawings that I did in Parsboro if I wasn't able to go up there.
Yeah.
2020, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Lynette, you connected Chris here, and I actually wanted to bring Chris in. Obviously a fable is different, but Chris, do you feel like your place while making this book or living in Toronto impacted the environment in this graphic novel at all, or
Yeah,
the connection place here?
I think it did. Yeah. I don't know. It's always hard for me to address things too directly in, whatever comics or graphic novels. And that's on me for whatever reason. So I kind of have to look at it at an angle and approach things kind of, indirectly. So I feel like the book Adherent, it ended up being very interior, but it was a result of too much happening around me. I mean, like Lynette said, there was no nature around me. I was just in my apartment. When I went out, it was very busy and, somewhat hostile. So I think it kind of forced me to go more, inward than, again, for better or for worse, than some of my past books. Yeah.
But I feel like there is something about maybe I just feel this way as a reader entering the world of Adherent for the first time. But there is something about it that kind of reminds me of maybe the feeling of anonymity, or even just the cover where there are these disparate objects lying around on the ground. I feel like there's something about that that does remind me of a city, you know, like, oh, there's a notebook left here at a bus stop, or, oh, like who left that shoe there? There's something about a lot of overlapping memories or things that have happened that you can no longer see. And there are just these objects left here. Like I hear you about not facing something, or not facing something, but not addressing something head on in the art. I definitely can relate to that. But yeah, there's definitely something still in this art that it's a natural world, but there's also all these man-made objects everywhere. And there's something, or ask you to tell people what that means by moving in a way that I could relate to living in a city. I don't know if that's something you want to add to.
Sure. You also broke up a little bit, so I'm going to have to like reconstruct your question in my
That was
mind.
probably a better question if you string it together that way.
Okay. But yeah, no, like toward the end of the book, there is a sort of, I don't know, abandoned city landscape that's kind of at the climax of the book. And there's like, yeah, like you said, objects strewn everywhere. And in a way, that's a very literal depiction of what I felt like Toronto was at points. Like you go out and it's, you know, almost desolate depending on what time during the pandemic you went out at. And then you see remnants of old stores that, you know, you used to love, but now they're closed and it's just the signage up. So it's like these little markers of kind of the world you used to know that's been transformed in various ways. So yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe that did seep its way into the book. I guess I don't always know myself, actually.
No, well, I mean, I that's why I love these conversations. And when we do have good art, good conversations about art, sometimes I feel like, you know, I kind of want to see the artist look at me and say, I'm not sure, you know, because I do feel like we're pulling on something here that doesn't have a definitive answer. And as you're describing the book, I feel like I'm taking in things that I wasn't taking in before. So really like a lot to dig into in these pages. So I do encourage people, even if you don't have the chance to pick up the book right away, check it out online and look at the art. It's really phenomenal. Go back to something that Kiona said, and maybe we can use this as like a final go around for everybody. So, you know, feel free to jump in as you feel like you have something coming up. Kiona mentioned like a BIPOC mentorship group, and that's got me thinking about the role of community in our lives now, but maybe also during the pandemic. If we're talking about healing and joy, I'd really like to make some time for discussion of community as the comics community comes together this month in a way that we all look forward to throughout the year. So just a toss-up question for everybody, just to end us off. What was the role of community for you in your creative projects for these books? Hopefully I didn't cut out there.
I feel like I didn't have community really throughout the pandemic. I had my spouse, which is a great luxury, of course. And I had a few friends, and we had to, you know, sit in lawn chairs far, far apart. Well, you know, we shouted and we were cold and stuff. But other than that, I felt really pretty much alone, and like there weren't meetings even of my groups of people. We just kind of all suspended for a while. And for me, I think it was good for writing that book, because I lived in my imagination a lot. I was able to sort of, you know, use insight instead of looking around. So yeah, no, it broke community up quite a bit, I'm sad to say.
Yeah, I guess I'll say similarly. I feel like it made me appreciate, like, I wish I had more connection during it. So it made me appreciate that absence of it when I was making the book, because with everything happening and because of the nature of comics, it's very insular. So it made me think more about what I need just in my life if I want to keep making comics here and there. Just a bigger appreciation of like the people I do have, basically.
For sure.
Yeah. I also with Lynette, I don't know. I don't know that I didn't have community, but starting this book when I did, I was like 30. I hadn't really been involved with comics before. I still don't feel like I've met a lot of other comic artists, and it's really nice talking to you all here today online. And I really can't wait to meet you all in person. And I just felt like I was just following all these kind of people on Instagram that I thought were cool, and it was totally up to that, and can feel a little bit like posting into the void. So I've never been to a TCAF before. I'm going to VanCAF and MCAF and all these things, and yeah, I'm excited and I'm a little overwhelmed. But I did have a small community of friends who are really, really supportive on this. Mostly visual artists and theater people. But I'm just excited to get out there and meet a lot of my comic connections in person, I guess.
Great. Kiona, I don't know if you have anything further to add about the role of community for you in this project. Your comment kind of inspired the question, but just want to pass it to you in case you want to add any more.
Yeah, I mean, I can just like say a bit more about what I already said, but yeah, didn't feel like I had a sense of community, didn't really feel like there was a lot of belonging or support in visual arts, and wasn't in comic arts yet. Yeah, that peer mentorship collective I mentioned, it's called Making Space. It was all virtual, and it was just about providing free programming to like BIPOC and racialized artists and to like support each other. So we were doing like connections through like art and cooking, knitting and rematriation. We did like little book clubs together about anti-racism, but also not about that stuff, like also just about joy and like decompressing and finding outlets together that didn't have to do with justifying ourselves. And like a big thing was like paying each other. So working together to go and find funding so that we could be paying above what like artist union fees are for like emerging BIPOC artists. And I think it was something that really like sustained and supported me in all avenues of my practice. And sometimes we just like hang out virtually in our studios, or sometimes we would have like little chat channels on Slack, or we would do, we had like a lot of established artists who would come and speak with us as artist talks or workshops that we would all take turns running. And like we had put aside like money for like childcare and stuff like that for people who are parents and needed childcare to come to the virtual events. And it was just like a way that made me feel a lot more hopeful about the direction that things can go, as long as like that support is there, but also sustaining that support is hard too, and like burnout happens. So I think like within community, remaining like flexible, that you're not always going to show up the same way, and that there's going to be like time where like you need to like readjust to one another, and you're just like collective problem solving, and it's nice to do together. So I think that was like a really big part of it. And then plus my community in like Michelle Band and my relatives, I would consider like community as well. So definitely, even though it wasn't like physically in person present with a lot of people all the time, being able to like feed each other and still connect in those ways when things were really hard, and like center that joy and building solidarities was really important.
Great.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I feel like there are a ton of really positive lessons in that. And the group is called Making Space. Is that right? If people want to check it out and support it. Yeah, I think that's a nice way for us to tie things off. I feel like our whether we are longing for more community or really appreciating the community that we have right now, or we're just super excited about the communities that we're maybe gonna meet and the people that we're gonna connect with over the next couple of weeks. I really hope that everybody continues to feel a sense that the comics community is a place where they can tap into and maybe find a little bit of that healing, a little bit of that joy. Yeah, I think that where we're at right now, we've got a couple of minutes left. So maybe what we could do is let everyone know how they can stay in touch with you if they want to find you on social media. And also, if you're going to be at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival at the end of April at the Toronto Reference Library, I know that Conundrum has a table on the main floor, 168 to 170. But if anybody, in addition to letting us know how we can find you on social media, if anybody has anything going on at TCAF or has another table, please let us know as we go through everybody. So Lynette, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I'll be at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival at the Conundrum table on Saturday and Sunday for at least an hour each day, and possibly at the Doug Wright Awards in the evening. And I am on social media. I've got a website for my business, and it has a Call Me Bill page. So my business is Rose Window Stained Glass. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, not very well. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks. Kyle, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I will definitely be at TCAF. I actually have a table that I'm sharing with my good friend, Guy Chung. Guy was the letterer on Kettle Harbour, and we're co-writing a new book together called A Rift in the Valley. So there'll be a preview of that, and that's table 2053 on the second floor. And I'll also be at the Conundrum table for signings both days. You can check me out on Instagram at KyleVC and KyleVC.com. That's V as in Victor. Thanks.
That's awesome. We're going to be, we'll be table neighbors at TCAF. I'm 2048, so I'll see you there.
That's
and Chris, why don't you come in next?
Sure. Yeah. So I will be at TCAF at the Conundrum table. And then I should also be at MCAF at the end of May, if everything goes well. And yes, social media stuff is just Chris W. Kim. So on Instagram, and yeah, that's my website as well.
Awesome. Thanks. And Kiona, where can people find you?
So sorry, there's a car alarm going off. I don't know if you can hear it, but
we can't hear it. It's okay.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to be at TCAF, yeah, at the Conundrum table doing signing. And then you can find me on Instagram at Kiona_Wynne. So KIONA_WYNNE. And then I have a website as well that has contact information, and that's just KionaLigtvoet.com.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Obviously, talking about a pandemic and creative processes can be sensitive subjects, but you've all shown up and opened your hearts to me and to our audience today. So thank you so much. I really look forward to getting to know all of you a little bit more at TCAF. As for me, I will be doing a signing for my new book, Dreams, Visions of the Crow, with Highwater Press at the festival. And as I said before to Kyle, I'll be hosting a Left Comics Club with a couple of different progressive publishers at table 2048, right next to Kyle. So come up and say hi to us if you're in person for the weekend. We'll be there both Saturday and Sunday. And if anybody wants to find me online on Instagram, I operate the publisher Instagram handle, which is ASTRA Comics, ADASTRA Comics with an X. So that about does it for us. Does anybody have any final thoughts, anything to leave us off with? We've got about 2 minutes left. So if there was anything I missed in my questions or any ideas to get out there, please feel free to jump in. We don't actually need to even be cut off right at the time either. Any thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, thanks. No, honestly, thanks to everyone. I do feel like that is a lasting impression of the pandemic for me. Is I feel much more grateful for the time that I do get to spend with people nowadays. And so this was a real treat to be able to talk with you all before the fest and to get to know a little bit more about your work. So thank you.
It was nice meeting you all.
Yes, nice meeting you all too. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Same here. And Kiona, I've got your book. It's great.
Oh.
It's heartwarming. Lovely.
Thank you.
They get it at the festival, all of your books.
Pick all of them up, do a big read.
I'm going to get everyone's, yeah.
All right.
Thanks everyone for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your days. We'll see you at TCAF.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye y'all.